We move on to the final section of mitzvahs in the Rambam's Book of Laws and Book of Mitzvahs. These are the mitzvahs that deal with the Jewish king. And when the Rambam in his Book of Laws talks about the Messianic era, the era of world peace that will be when Mashiach comes. Today's first mitzvah is the mitzvah that we are commanded to appoint a Jewish king. This is one of the three mitzvahs that the Jewish people were commanded to do when they came into the land of Israel as an entire Jewish nation together. The other two mitzvahs were to wipe out the nation of Amalek that were a constant source of great pain and suffering to the Jewish people, and to build the temple. We will do these mitzvahs once again, when Mashiach comes. This king is supposed to be someone for whom we have tremendous awe and respect and reverence and fear, as is appropriate with a monarch. And the respect that we have for the king is supposed to be even greater than the respect that we have for our prophets. Chassidus teaches us that the king, and the Rambam tells us that the king is the heart of the Jewish people. Just like the heart pumps the blood and the life force throughout the body, so too the king pumps the spiritual life throughout the Jewish nation. The king is supposed to be on a tremendously high spiritual level, deeply connected with Hashem, representing Hashem. And the king inspires and gives strength to all the Jewish people, each one individually and all together, to be connected to Hashem. The king's orders are to be obeyed as he says, and we are not to go against what the king says. As long as what the king says is in line with the Torah, those who disobey the king's word, the king has permission to execute them and to take their belongings. There is a mitzvah that tells us who is this king supposed to be. The verse states, "You should not appoint for yourselves a stranger who is not from your brothers." We know that King David is the prime example of the Jewish king, and it says that King David merited for the crown of kingship for him and his offspring after him. For that the king is supposed to be specifically from the dynasty of King David, and anybody who is not from the dynasty of King David is considered to be a stranger when it comes to kingship, just like anybody who is not from the offspring of Aaron the priest is a stranger when it comes to serving as a Kohen, as a priest, and serving in the temple. The same thing with anybody who is not from the family of King David when it comes to kingship. However, before King David became the king, this verse and this mitzvah was coming to tell us that the Jewish king is supposed to be specifically somebody who was born into a Jewish family and not a convert. Now, there are a few mitzvahs about the way the king is supposed to conduct himself. One mitzvah is the king is not supposed to have multiple horses. He can have one horse that he rides on, and of course whatever he needs for his army and for protection of the nation, but not extra horses just to go in front of his entourage to add for his own personal respect and honor. There is another mitzvah that tells us the king is not supposed to have multiple wives. In a time when people would get married to many more than one wife, we're told that the limit for a king is 18 wives. We know that King Solomon had many more than that. We'll talk about that in a second. And there's another mitzvah that the king is not supposed to have lots of gold and silver just for himself. Of course, he's allowed to keep the treasures for the nation and to have lots for the Jewish people, but not for himself. And the Rambam tells us something very interesting about the reasons for the mitzvahs. He says that all these mitzvahs about the way the king is supposed to conduct himself were given reasons in the Torah. The Torah tells us why the king is not supposed to have many horses, and the Torah says he's not supposed to have lots of gold and silver and multiple wives, because it will turn away his heart from God. As we mentioned before, the king is supposed to be deeply connected with Hashem. King Solomon was called Yedid Kel, which means the beloved of God. And he was on a tremendously high level of wisdom and on a very high level of righteousness. And still we see that he went and did otherwise. He took more than what the Torah says. Because when we are given reasons for things, it can cause huge mistakes, that we will start to be logical in our own head and get around the reasons and say, as long as we keep the intention, we keep the purpose, we won't turn away our heart from God, whatever the reason is. But we don't actually have to keep the law. We know how to safeguard ourselves without keeping the law that was given because of the purpose, as long as we'll keep the intention in mind. And this is a very dangerous approach, because if we take this approach, we can throw away half of the Torah. And we see that even King Solomon made this mistake. How much more so when it comes to simple people, that giving us reasons for everything can be harmful. And we are not to always be logical. Of course, we should look for reasons when we're able to, but we should realize that all the mitzvahs have reasons, but some of them are beyond our logic, and they weren't all given to us specifically, so we should do them because Hashem told us, and not just because of the reasons that we can try to figure out ways to get around. All the mitzvahs connect us with Hashem and bring us joy in being connected with Hashem, and we shouldn't just limit it to our own logic. Thank you for watching.